So one of the things that can be useful to do within Excel is to display your data in a box and whisker plot, which is not something that Excel can natively do without a little bit of persuasion. A lot of more advanced stats programs will allow you to do this, but basically if you can add numbers and subtract numbers, you can create the visualization of a box and whisker. So what I'm going to take you through now is a way of using Excel to do a box and whisker chart on this range of data that you have here. So we'll actually generate a graphic that has 5 different box and whiskers, one for each of these charts. So to do it, we need to create our results and our output in a way that Excel can understand when we kind of do that persuasion part in the graphs and the formatting to make it look like a box and whisker. So the first thing that we need to do is just to kind of calculate some of the useful things for us. So we need to have the average of all of the data as just a normal average and standard deviation. You would pretty much do that for data all the time, every time. But we'd also going to need things like the minimum. So to get the minimum in Excel, the formula is just min, and then select your data and you're good to go. To get quartile, which is basically where the upper quartile is where you have 25% of the, or the lower quartile is where you have 25% of the data below, and the upper quartile is where you have 25% of the data above. So it sort of sets boundaries on the data. So between the lower and upper quartile, you have half of your data points. So using the formula quartile, we can again select the data we're interested in and then enter in the quartile that we want. So we want the first quartile, or Q1. We can use a similar formula to the average to get the median. Again, type in median and select your data. You'll all be familiar with the principles of formulas now. And set exactly the same procedure for the other quartile. So for the upper quartile, it's 3. And then we're good to go. And then the last one is max. So again, same logic for the maximum. Now, you'll notice that in the orange colored cells, things have been happening already. And really what's in those cells is a series of references to the green set. So the first reference is the bottom. So when we're drawing this in Excel, we need to basically say, what is the bottom of the box part of the box and whisker? So where is the lower quartile? And there we've got it as Q1. Now, because of the way we're going to do this in Excel and how we're going to approach it, we need to define the distance from the lower quartile to the median. And you see we have Q1 and median, and obviously the way we're going to do that is just to find the difference between the two. So the median minus Q1 gives us the result for the lower quartile box, let's say, the lower quartile to median. And an exactly similar type of approach is from the median to the upper quartile. Same applies for doing the whiskers. Again, we have the negative whisker, which is basically from the bottom of the lower quartile to the minimum, and then we have the upper quartile, which is from the upper to the maximum. So it's all the same logic. Once you've got those done for one, you can just drag it across and you're good to go for all of them. So now we have the basic data that we need, and it's really the stuff in the orange we're going to use to graph and turn it into a box and whisker. So let's just move this guy a little bit out of the way. We can bring it back later. And let's create our box and whisker chart. So we need to highlight the titles of our data, and then holding down the control key, I'm going to highlight the 3 key parts I want first. So the box part of the box and whisker. And now this is going to be a bit strange, but we're going to use a column chart and we're going to use the stacked column. And this doesn't look anything like a box and whisker chart just yet. But don't fear, it will very soon. So let's do a quick bit of tidying and get rid of those grid lines that we don't like. So if you think about it, and if you do a quick comparison, and particularly on this one, you can see we have the green box is very similar to the median to upper quartile. The red box is very similar to the median to the lower quartile. So the boundary of those two boxes is actually the median. We just need to get rid of this blue box, but we can't just delete it, because if I just click on it and delete it, our data doesn't look anything like we want it to. So we need to hide it. And we do that very easily by formatting the data series. So I'll say no line and no fill. And now it's invisible, which means that we now have floating boxes. So we're halfway there. We have part of our box and whisker chart done. Okay, so now it's starting to look a little bit more like this. But now we need to add in those error bars or those ranges for the maximum and minimum. So again, to do that, we have to include them as error bars in Excel. So Excel will call them error bars. So if you go on Chart Tools to Layout and then pick error bars, and we're going to do particularly defined error bars. Now Excel will try and be clever. We don't want it to try and be clever. So with the green box, what we want is from the upper quartile to the maximum, okay? And in the orange boxes, it's calling that whisker positive, so the upper whisker. We only want it to be going up. We don't want it to go up and down. That'll be confusing. And we're going to make it a custom value. So I want to specify that the positive error value is going to be this one. And there's no negative error value. So when I hit OK, you see magically I get whiskers. Now, this is a kind of conceptually a weird bit. We have an invisible data box, and that's what we're actually going to use to draw our lower whisker. Because if we try and use the red box here, it will try and draw the whisker from the top end of the box, which is really our median. So we're going to draw it from the lower end of the box. So here we go. We'll highlight the bit we're interested in. We'll go to error bars again. We'll pick the additional error bars options. We'll tell it we only want to go minus in this case. And we'll also say that we want a custom error bar because we don't want the silly things Excel is trying to do. And in this case, we're going to pick the negative error value. We pick the negative whisker. We hit OK. And then we close. And now we have generated a box and whisker chart. We can obviously put in all our usual extra bits and pieces. That we need to do, and we can change sizes of fonts and so on. But ultimately, this is really a box and whisker chart using Excel. Most people will format the data series and they will make the gap between the data a little bit smaller, which has the result of making their boxes a little bit fatter. You can see in glucose there's not really much going on. The cholesterol is arguably a little bit skewed towards having a longer tail of higher values, which might be something that you would come across biologically. So again, if you look at it now, it's very similar to that box and whisker that we actually started off with. We've now turned this into something that we can use, and I'm using very broad data, obviously, just to give you as an example, but we can create something quite unusual from Excel with a little bit of persuasion.